This presentation is about religion in the workplace, answering the question, should employees be allowed to wear symbols of faith in the workplace? First of all, the history of religious liberty protection in the U.S. The First Amendment says, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. This gives people and organizations the right to be free from government-sponsored religion or government-sponsored lack of religion. It also gives them the right to be a part of the religion of one's own choosing. The government can't make you be a part of any religion. Next comes the Civil Rights Act of 1964, Title VII. This prohibits employers from discriminating in hiring and in the workplace based on race, color, religion, sex, or national origin, and this is widely used today. Next, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission issued its first guidelines in 1966. These guidelines simply emphasize neutrality and establishing normality within the workplace. These guidelines were amended in 1967, and then they required accommodation except in instances of undue hardship to the employer. Now, undue hardship is very loosely defined and has no technical legal definition. It has been defined as different things and even contradictory things in the past. For example, Trans World Airlines v. Hardison and Ansonia Board of Education v. Philbrook established a precedent of de minimis cost when defining undue hardship. However, there has been an inconsistent application of de minimis cost as the standard for undue hardship, as we will see. So de minimis cost is a cost with more than minimal loss or burden to an employer. This means that an employer can deny an accommodation based on religion if they can prove that there's more than minimal cost. So this can mean a minimal safety risk, minimal economic cost, or a burden on other employees. The religious accommodation can be denied with the presence of de minimis cost. And past cases include denial in cases based on dress code, unpaid leave, voluntary shift changes, and other random absences. This low burden of proof can lead to employers deciding which religious accommodation they wish to comply with and which ones they wish to deny based on de minimis. It gives employers a lot of freedom with what they wish to accommodate. And let's look into some court cases. So Tooley versus Martina Corporation. This was established as not de minimis cost in request for a Seventh-day Adventist to pay union dues to a charitable organization rather than a union because the Seventh-day Adventist requires that their members not be a part of any unions or pay dues to unions. And this was seen as not a de minimis cost, so this accommodation was granted. Now, DePriest versus Department of Human Services was granted more than de minimis cost in paying one employee overtime so another employee could attend a one-time religious observance. In this case, an employee wanted to travel somewhere to observe a religious holiday, and the cost to the employer was the cost of overtime so that another employee could cover their shifts. However, this was not granted, and it was said there was more than minimal cost to the employer in a one-time observance. So courts allowed the permanent waiver of union dues, but would not allow the one-time cost of overtime. Adai versus Heartland Sweeteners was granted not de minimis in 3 weeks unpaid leave so an employee could attend his father's burial in Nigeria in accordance with religious customs. So this person was granted 3 weeks off. Even though it was unpaid, we can assume that someone else was going to have to pick up that work. And next, the EEOC versus Firestone Fibers and Textiles Company was granted more than de minimis in 8 non-consecutive days of unpaid leave to observe 2 religious holidays. Again, we can see this unequal application. The courts allowed 21 days of unpaid leave for one employee as less than de minimis cost and declared 8 days of unpaid leave for an employee more than de minimis cost. Again, unequal application. So, as we continue looking at symbols of faith, according to law, employers must allow symbols of faith except in cases where they can prove a de minimis cost to the employer. And some examples of these cases might be in clothing, and such. So if a headdress might get caught in machinery, and that can be seen as a cost due to safety. An example where an employer could prohibit religious symbols legally might be rules pertaining to personal paraphernalia at the desks of salespeople with great interaction with customers. And this is legal because the rule is not specifically for religious symbols, it's simply for all symbols of anything, and it applies equally to everyone. So it can be baseball teams, religion, personal preferences, stuff like that. There are some arguments against promoting religious freedom in the workplace. Skeptics say that providing an accommodation for someone will lead to an unbalanced work environment. Say that gives people who hold religion some sort of greater stand over the people who don't hold any religion at all. However, there is always going to be give and take in a diverse work environment. There are going to be people who have different needs and wants, and people with different skills. Skeptics also say that in order to be equal, an employer should be able to treat everyone exactly the same and have to follow exactly the same rules. So this argument is saying that there should be no religious accommodation because everyone should be treated equally. However, this could lead to the loss of highly intelligent, diverse employees. If you have an employee who wishes to wear religious jewelry or a headscarf and you're not willing to accommodate that, they may feel strongly enough to simply leave and find another job. That's a very valid opportunity for them. And an overbearing manager never leads to a positive work environment. Someone who stringently exposes people who want to do that kind of thing and enforces rules is not going to be fun. So for promoting religious freedom in the workplace is not a bad thing, as many might assume. It can allow employees to embrace their differences. It can start conversations about people's personal lives if they want to. It can also create camaraderie and greater happiness in employees. So they have the freedom to talk around the water cooler about the religious service that they attended that weekend or the religious holiday that they are observing coming up. Happiness in the workplace has been tied to greater productivity and even increased revenue. And symbols of religion and religious freedom in the workplace should not be feared by employers. Embracing fairness and following the law can create a better work environment. And who doesn't want a better work environment? That always leads to better things. And that's the end of my presentation on religious freedom in the workplace. I believe that religious symbols should always be granted within reason.